Welcome to Your Town. It's a monthly program. I'm Mary Ann Leffel. I'm president of the Monterey County Business Council, and I host one of these every month. So tune in and learn a little bit more about your community. We've got two great guests today, and I'm going to start with one of my absolute favorite people on the whole planet, and she's worked with me on projects, I think, for about 25 years. So Mary Carbone, Mayor of Sand City. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you had a great month last month in Sand City. How many people attend the West End celebration?
Well, West End is coming up in like about 10 more days. So there's thousands that come to attend, and it's a great 3 days of activities. We have a kickoff party on Friday night that benefits nonprofits. I believe this year it's Guitars Not Guns. And then it's a free 2-day event on Saturday and Sunday with lots of great free music and artists and just great time.
So I'm going to hold this up a second. So it's the poster. Now we're being shown right now in September. So West End has already happened by the time the viewers will see this.
Oh, okay.
So, but this was this year, and if you saw the lineup, you should have been there because it's fabulous. So anyway, I've gone every year. I'm going to miss this year, but I promise I'll be back next year. I won't schedule something. So let's talk about it. Sand City's done a great job of developing an artist community. And in my banking days, I had 2 or 3 artists who came to me for live-work spaces. And Sand City really was the first municipality around here to really adopt that and to start allowing people to live in the space that they were working in. And it has paid off in dividends, I think, both for Sand City and for our community as a whole, because it provided a kind of a haven for people of like mind who are creative. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. So yes, Sand City's vision was to go with a planned or mixed units. So their vision was to create a workspace and living space, and to help like with the with a footprint so that people could work and live in their community. And it turned out to be a great little hub of people, or the artists in down near the West End. And it's a really kind of city in motion, moving and happening. So
no, it's fun. It has so much energy, Marianne, when you go there. And, you see people coming out their front door and walking into the neighbor's front door, and they exchange ideas, and they help each other. Mm-hmm. So it's truly a community, and I love being there and feeling that. It just feels good. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm so excited you opened it up to the whole public for the West End celebration so more people can see what you've got going on there.
Yes. So, yes, this way we get to showcase our artists and invite everyone into our city to come and check it out and check out the artists and the city and see what the Sand City has to offer.
So it's perfect. Now, Sand City's had a ton of changes this year. So David Pendergrass was the mayor for how many years?
39 years.
39, holy cow. And he announced his retirement, and he moved out of the area to be closer to family. So your council elected you as the mayor.
Yes.
And then immediately you had another council member who announced moving out of the area.
Yes, we did.
And so you appointed, is it Greg Hawthorne, to fill that first position?
We have filled, we had Todd Kruper leave, our councilman, and he moved up north to follow his dreams, and he was an artist. And so he left, and we had the city council decided to put me in as mayor, elect me in as mayor, to finish out the term of David Pendergrast of 2018. And then we had put out a request to citizens on who may like to be a part of city government. And we had a few people, and we interviewed and voted, kind of voted in between amongst the council, and they ended up picking Gregory Hawthorne, and owner of Hawthorne Gallery down the coast, and he's been a resident in the city for about 20 years.
Well, he built one of the first really nice live-work units.
He did. He did.
Yeah, and really, I think, I'm going to say, raised the bar on the way that street looked. So, and then you had a second person who resigned.
And then Greg filled my spot because Mayor Pendergrass left. So, and then Todd Kruper left. So we had a second spot, and then we filled that spot with Kristen McDaniel. Okay. And she is a local resident, a young lady with a little family, and we thought she's bright and interested in the city, and young mother, so thought, well, that would be a good mix to with the city council, since we're all, been on there forever. So
yeah, no, that's great. I really think it's great. Have some new ideas, new blood, and
right.
It's always good to have some change.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
Speaking of change, I mean, Sand City probably had the most remarkable change since I've lived here of any place, because it was the old kind of like sand and gravel place, and it's where people went, and there were a lot of businesses that were kind of sometimes half thought out. So now it's just totally remarkable. It's where everybody goes. If there's one person around here that hasn't been to Costco, I'd like to meet him.
Well, you're putting it pretty lightly, Mary Ann. The Sand City was the old dumping ground of the Monterey Peninsula. So it was incorporated in 1960 by, back then, I guess he was a developer or contractor, Phil Calabrese. And from there, the city started to evolve. So that was the beginning of the city, and it was blighted and run down, and you could see along the beach there is a lot of concrete and stuff that we still need to take care of, but the city has been moving in a positive direction on becoming a good steward to our beautiful bay. The city, I believe it's like a mile and a half long, Sand City, by about a half a mile wide, and the Pacific Ocean is our border to the inside. The city of Seaside is our neighbor, and so we look at being stewards of the peninsula. That is a gateway to the peninsula, and then trying to make it a vibrant little community. So it has been a city in motion, change. We do have a couple shopping centers that were put in probably in the, 90s.
I think 90s, yeah.
And so those are regional hubs, shopping hubs for the peninsula. And so that's been a great asset, Costco. And what else is new?
Well, I think you have a whole plethora of artists who have moved in there, who are doing work there and selling whatever they create, and I think that's your West End, and then your East End is the more traditional retail. Is that correct?
Right. We have the some big box, so the shopping centers are to the north of the city. The west side is our old town, and that is where we have our little artist community. And so they're over there, creating and great. It's just great. It will be a change coming here sometime in the future. We have a developer who's wanting to put in a couple hotels and some new housing units. So, and that that's new. It's a South of Tioga project. So that there is something that we will be looking at. And then, of course, our desal plant, so that we're able to build out the city in due time. And then in the meantime, our desal, we have leased it to Cal-Am for the overpumping of the Carmel River. So it's a part of the water solution at the peninsula right now. So.
Which is great. I mean, I really admire Sand City for just moving forward quietly and expertly and getting some solution built. I totally appreciate that. Okay. Everybody spends all their time talking and fighting and not getting anything done. So Sand City is my hero. They just kind of get it done.
Well, thanks. So it needs to be done. You do have to, have change or come to solutions or figure out the problems. And this desal plant, that was David Pendergrass, our past mayor. He served with a lot of the water boards and so different solutions to the water problems, and this was one of them. So this was kind of a first step in the peninsula's water woes. So
Good.
Still working on it.
There are 2 beachfront developments, is that correct, that are somewhere in the approval process? They've either been approved or they are partially approved.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. So back, I think it was around 2000, Sand City came to met with regional parks and state parks, and we had a peace accord where everything from Tioga south, the city would keep that as open space along the beach. So 70 to 80% of the beach areas in Sand City is open space. And we, as a part of that, the city had picked 2 building envelopes to the north of Tioga, and that would be for future development for property owners if they did deem so that they could do it. And there is a couple projects, a couple developments. One is Egg Gondor's project, and the other is a King Ventures project, a smaller project.
So I look forward to seeing those move forward and come to fruition.
That would be nice.
That would be good. I think it would be good for all of us. Now, population is what, 330 about?
330.
And I know there are some new houses that have just been built or are being built. So do you expect to hit 400 anytime in the next few years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have, I think they just built nine, maybe 11 new homes. Mm-hmm. And 3 of them will be ready to see this weekend up for sale. Some beautiful homes. And then sometime here in the future, I mentioned the South of Tioga project, and that project is going to consist of a couple hotels, small, and then some housing, which the developer is estimating, and this is just rough, 420 units or dwellings. So I'm calculating with small families, if you have a family make perhaps a 3, I'm estimating that probably might raise the population of the city by 1,200.
So that's remarkable growth.
So that's a whole nother story, and we're going to have to study that,
Yeah.
the impacts on that. So, but this is one of the things, you know, as far as upcoming developments and just things that we need to look at as a city.
So I want to talk about Indigenous people. So are you the only Native American mayor in the state of California?
Actually, I was told I was the only Native American mayor in the United States.
Wow.
That was told to me. Coast Weekly mentioned it when I was appointed or voted in as the mayor. I'm sure there's other Native people who hold other offices, but yes, that's true.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is.
It is. So I know you have a resolution.
I do.
And so is it the second week in October?
It is. It is. There is a resolution coming to the city, and the resolution is to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day, and that will be coming to the city September 5th. So, and so this is kind of a big issue. There's in the Native American community, it's been spoken of for years now, and the Native people have been trying to address this with me and the Monterey cities, and as well as cities all over in each state. And so what they are wanting to do is to be recognized as the Native people, or the original people of the land. So in place of Columbus Day. So it may be controversial, but it will be coming to the city, and so look out for it.
Okay, well, I'm excited. So, Marianne, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll have you again because we want to stay updated on what's going on in Sand City. I think it's so important. And, you know, as small as that city is, it has tremendous impact on all of us, and the impact has been very positive. So, as one citizen of another city, I thank you for what you all have done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So don't go away. We'll be back in a minute. This is your town, and we got lots more in store. Thanks. Welcome back to your town. Learn about your community every month. We're here. I'm Ann Leffel. I'm president of the Monterey County Business Council, and very happy to host this segment of your town. So my second guest today is someone who I totally admire, worked on a lot of things together, and consider her one of my good friends, and really someone that can get something done, which I appreciate. So, Nancy Amadeo, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind introduction.
So, well, you've earned every bit of it.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate people who stand by their beliefs and speak up and don't just go off in a corner and talk about it and don't affect change. So,
well, as an elected person, that's my job.
Well, not all do it, though.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much.
You know, let's talk about being elected a minute. It's really interesting to me when people run for, I'm going to say council particularly. They run because maybe something tweaked them in their neighborhood, or, you know, I'm going to make light of this, but, you know, the stop sign wasn't where people wanted it in a neighborhood, and the neighbors come together, and pretty soon you become the spokesperson, and then pretty soon you're elected because you have this issue. But I don't think people understand that when you're elected to something like a city council, that then you also serve on so many regional boards and other things that impact the entire community.
Right.
And you have done a really good job, Nancy, of understanding the issues of some of these bigger things that affect all of us.
And I would say part of that is because I didn't have an agenda when I ran.
That's good.
I was never involved in any one thing that I said, oh, I need to run so I can take care of this. What I'd done was form relationships with members of the community who encouraged me, who said, gee, you know, maybe you should consider being on the Planning Commission because you really seem to care about the community. So I started attending both City Council meetings and Planning Commission meetings. And I did that for over a year. And then they said, you know, now's probably the time. You should probably actually apply for Planning Commission. So I did. And when I say they, it was people from all different parts of the community. So I applied, and lo and behold, they appointed me, and what a learning opportunity that was. Attended league conferences and learn what it really means, not just to be a planning commissioner, but to impact your community in a positive way. So that was my start, instead of being the start that I think you're correct is more typical of council members, is they have an issue. I didn't have an issue. I had a community that I loved, that I wanted to see be successful in a region that was successful and would also benefit from Marina joining that success.
No, it's remarkable. How big is the population now, Marina? Is it about 30,000?
No, oh no, not even close. It's 21,000.
21,
We're
okay.
still very small.
But with the additional housing that's going in along Imgen and
we'll
along
probably
Second,
reach, when the housing is completed, we will probably be very close to 30,000. And then we will still have the old Cypress Knolls idea of development. That piece of property that continues to divide Marina in half, we will have the opportunity to focus in on that. Right now we have so many projects going on that had to be put aside. It frustrates people because it is blight, but you have limited staff and there's only so much that they can do no matter what the council would like.
yeah, well,
You
and
have to prioritize.
everything takes time and money.
Absolutely.
Those two things.
Yes. In fact, former Councilman Ken Gray made that very comment from the dais because people were frustrated and because we were supporting things, or the council was supporting things that the public said, why are you doing this? This is not valuable. We want open space and trails and et cetera. And he said, but wait a minute, everything costs money. You have to remember the things that you want cost money. And so you need to have that economic growth in order to achieve your other goals. And I thought it was very well put. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And there has to be that balance all the time.
Yeah, I think, it's similar to the conversations right now about workforce housing. And, you look at workforce housing and how do we provide for our workforce. And I think we have a lot of jobs here that are kind of going begging for that middle management level.
Right.
Which we have people that can do those jobs.
But they can't afford to live
But they
here.
can't afford to live here. Or if they can afford to live here, it's in something that is below the standards that they're used to,
Right.
coming from another region.
That's correct. Actually coming from outside California, because even if you look at the Central Valley, they're having the same kinds of problems that we are. The cost of living in California is so high, and the affordable housing is disappearing. And that's really unfortunate. And it's disappearing for a lot of reasons. Just the way our market climbs has something to do with that. But it climbs beyond the accessibility of the average person. But then we're also seeing, and it's a huge problem here on the coast, the issue of short-term rentals. So a property owner says, gee, I can make a whole lot more money off of this property if I no longer rent it long-term. And they're correct. They can make a whole lot more money. So cities are now grappling with how do we manage Do we just say no short or an ordinance against it? Or do we say, well, wait a minute, that's really infringing on the rights of the property owner? Do we allow it without ordinance? Or do we look at a percentage of our housing stock that could be for short term? And that's certainly one of the things that the City of Marina is looking at now. I've been requesting it for about a year, and our Planning Commission is now working on it because it is such a serious issue. Marina's been the moderate and low-income housing for the region for a long time. And now we're building new market rate homes, and this is great. It provides that balance. We don't want to lose it to the upside because we're not managing the low income and moderate income housing. So it's a complicated issue.
It really is. And I think people don't realize when you have, and I'm just going to say how many fees and hands are out
Right.
to fund agencies and other services.
Right.
And, you know, that it's between $40,000 and $60,000 a door, which
Right.
is how it's thought of in this world.
Yeah.
Before you ever even get anything in the ground and start to build. And so,
And that's if you're building in Monterey or in, I'm going to say, Central Marina. Some people refer to it as old. I don't like that term. It makes it sound tired and worn out, and we want to vitalize it. But it does work in that dollar sense. But half of Marina is on Fort Ord, so double that. Before you ever begin vertical construction, you've probably invested $80,000 to $100,000 per door.
so when you do that, obviously the end user is going to pay for it. The developer doesn't do it out of the bottom of their hearts that they just put $100,000 out to house somebody.
Yeah.
So, and then that rolls into the whole rest of the area. So really FORA is, the portion of FORA that's got housing is actually helping to drive up the costs.
That's correct.
All over our region.
That is correct.
Because every time a house goes up in one place, it goes up in another.
And that's true whether it's to purchase or it's to rent. We have seen rental prices in our area skyrocket. And when I say in our area, I'm not talking just Marina. We just did our budget for Abrams Park, which is one of our large former military housing areas. And in order to come up with appropriate rent increases, you look at surrounding communities. And it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying to see what we are now expecting market rate housing to go for. And now I look at the Section 8 or the low, very low, and you're still talking $700, $800 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment for someone who that's 50% of their income.
Who's maybe making $15 an hour.
An hour.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So it really is frightening to watch it escalate. And if it escalates in one area, you are correct. It will follow suit in another. And trying to find a way to control that is really difficult. It's really, really difficult. And we have to have solutions or we're going to have more Lapis Road.
Yeah, that in itself is a huge issue.
It's a gigantic issue.
Last Sunday, Hal and I went to San Jose to see one of our granddaughters in a play, and we left around 10 or so in the morning, and I counted 52 vehicles that just I could see.
Right.
There were others that kind of,
About
there are
30
some
more.
gullies that they disappeared down
The
into.
last count it varies between 85 and 100 vehicles parked there on any given day. And some of it is just, that road is actually listed on a website as free camping.
Oh, interesting.
So some of those are just people who are passing through.
And they say, wow.
Yeah, oh look, place I can park overnight. No, you can't, but it's not been enforced. And why has it not been enforced? Because there's no place for those people to go. There's no housing they can afford. Is there a criminal element out there? Yes. But there's also a lot of people who are just down on their luck. And what do? It's a very, and our supervisor, Jane Parker, is working hard. She and I have communicated frequently on this issue, but until cities are willing to recognize that they have an obligation to all of their citizens, whether they live in houses or they live in cars, there's an obligation to care for them. They are our citizens. And one of those obligations is to provide adequate housing. And right now, none of us are doing that. And there's a huge disconnect I see in my area because we have so much low-income housing already. And they're saying, why should we build more? Well, because we haven't solved the problem yet.
You also, I think when I look at Marina, you've got a lot of places where people can park or camp or just
Except we don't allow it in our city.
No, but you have a lot of places that aren't just out in the public where everybody sees it. And so it's not as apparent to the overall population.
And we do have several homeless encampments in Marina. Yeah. We used to have one right in the center of town and nobody knew it. Nobody knew it was there because it was in a park and it was heavily wooded and people didn't realize it was there, including council members. As a child care provider, I became acutely aware that it was there because I got a phone call from a parent whose child was in my daycare that said he never showed up at school. And I went to the police department and they did a search and they used the sheriff's helicopter and he was at the homeless encampment in the center of town.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's how I learned about it. I didn't know it existed.
Yeah, I think there are pockets everywhere. I
agree.
Where I live in Monterey, we're surrounded by a canyon, and I see people coming out of the canyon,
right,
or at dusk going into the canyon, and on just a path that you wouldn't even notice if you just were driving by that every day to go to work. You'd never know it. I just am inordinately curious, I'll say. Not nosy, but I'm probably that. But, it's easy to just kind of drive past it and not see it because it's not affecting you, but it is affecting all of us. It really is. It
is. It's affecting us in a huge way. And I'm on the Board of Community Human Services, and we deal with those substance abuse, runaways, mental illness, but that's only about 25% of the homeless population. That says a lot about how we're not caring for the people who live here.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And even with that population, the 25%, we do not have enough services to help those that want help. They go on waiting lists.
Well, people, it's like, oh, this just happened. It didn't
just happen.
I moved here in 1982, and I worked at Security Pacific Bank. It's the building where Monterey County Bank is on the corner of Munris and Webster.
Yes.
That was our branch. And once a month, as the operations officer, I had to do an alarm test. So the alarm guy would come, and we would go, and we would test all of the exit doors and make sure that the alarms were working. So we went upstairs, and we went out on this little balcony area. We did it, and it was like, wow. Laid out there was a uniform. It said Terry on the name.
Right.
It was a Swenson's ice cream. I don't know if you remember the Swenson's ice cream.
Yes.
So it was some person who worked at Swenson's ice cream. We had a night light there on that, so he had a light to read by. He had his little paperback novel was there, and a little thing of some water, and he obviously could wash up at work, or he could not, I guess. And then he had a change of clothes. He had his uniform, and it was all very nicely laid out so it would be smooth to put on when he got ready to go to work. But obviously he was our tenant on that little balcony and had been for probably weeks, and none of us knew that. Didn't disturb us. He didn't do anything. But It was a safe place. It was up out of the elements, and I think there's so many tucked away like that.
That's
that
right.
people don't realize. But that was 1982.
Right.
So when people say, "Oh, this just happened," it didn't just happen.
We've always had a serious issue in California, not just in our area, with people living on the streets. My oldest daughter went to a UC Santa Barbara and then followed it to get her teaching credential down in Long Beach. And when we moved her down to Long Beach, I will say I had an urgent matter I needed to take care of. And my husband had the truck and I was driving my car. And so I started flashing my lights on him. And we're getting ready to go, we're on the 405 getting ready to go over the mountain. There's nothing, no place to stop. And I'm flashing my lights and he finally just pulls off. And there was an area where you could pull off the highway. And I ran out of the car and up into the wooded area, right into a homeless encampment.
Wow.
And fortunately, they were all out doing whatever they needed to do. Maybe some of them were employed, maybe not. But it was empty at the time, but it was obviously a place where about 30 people lived. And that shocked me.
Yeah.
It truly shocked me. I probably would have been less shocked if they had been there, because to me that was what homelessness actually was, is that people who, my misconception, were lazy and they just preferred living on the streets, and they were all alcoholics and drug users. But that's not what I saw when I saw this empty encampment. You could tell that families lived there. So maybe some of them were taking their children to school.
Yeah.
It put homelessness in a whole different perspective.
It puts a different
for me.
face on it.
Absolutely,
So.
absolutely.
So we're going to take a break. This is Your Town. Don't go away. We'll be back in a minute. Nancy Amadeo, Councilwoman from Marina. Thank you. Welcome back. This is Your Town. I'm your host for this segment. My name is Mary Ann Leffel. I'm president of the Monterey County Business Council. And I'm very honored and pleased to have Nancy Amadeo with me today. If you were with us before the break, you heard we're having a discussion about the homeless and the housing situation, which is really a conversation we should all be having. So Nancy, thank you again for joining us today.
My pleasure.
In half and put it in a box, and I keep it together. Welcome back. This is Your Town. We've got a great segment today. My guest is Nancy Amadeo, council member from Marina. I'm Mary Ann Leffel. I'm your hostess, and I'll tell you what, you're going to learn a lot about how government operates, or sometimes not, and some big problems, because now we're on the topic of homeless, and what a topic.
A huge topic, and not easily resolved.
No, it's not. And people have all kinds of misconceptions and deep feelings.
Absolutely.
And I was telling you during the break, I refuse to give money to a panhandler. It just goes against my grain, because I don't know anything about that person and I don't know what they're going to use the money for.
Right.
And I have scoffed at giving food. But I was in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and they brought my sandwich, and it was enough to feed a family of 4.
I've seen those kind of sandwiches.
So I cut it in half and had them put it in a box with all the condiments and things. And when I walked out, there had been a gentleman, I could see him through the window, who was out on the sidewalk. So anyway, I said to him, I have lunch if you would like lunch. And he was terribly grateful. and he opened it and just started woofing it down. So it made me feel like I had chosen the right person to give it to.
Yeah.
And I know my granddaughters do that quite a bit because you seem to always get too much in a lot of places when you order. But I think that's just like the little teeny tip of the iceberg, and we have to be aware of the fact that even that may encourage others to come to an area where sometimes the behavior's good and sometimes the behavior's not. So, we have places like Interim Inc., and we have Community Human Services, and we have several nonprofits in our region.
Absolutely.
Who really address well some of these issues. But it's just like trying to plug a
sticking
huge...
your finger in the dike.
Yeah.
And, you're only going to hold back that water for a little while. And then that hole's going to get bigger. And we've seen the hole become monstrous because we didn't deal with the issues in the very beginning. Community Human Services, Interim, they do deal with those issues, but they don't get enough revenue to provide for the huge need that's out there. And that need is the tip of the iceberg of the homeless need, because it goes well beyond substance abuse and mental illness. There's a lot of homeless youth out there. And when I say youth, I'm not talking about young children. I am talking about the 18 to 25-year-old who the moment they hit 18, they were kicked out of their home. Maybe they were kicked out when they were 16. And don't have the necessary skills to be able to support themselves. So Community Human Services, through a couple of its programs, tries to do intervention, but we only have 6 beds. The population of homeless youth, and Monterey is a good example of that because this seems to be where they congregate, is multitudes larger than 6 beds. It's scary because if we don't take care of the problem changes. And now we didn't spend the money to deal with it when it was a homeless problem. Now, in order to survive, it becomes a criminal problem. And we will spend the money in a very big way on jails and prisons and public defenders and prosecutors and police. And the list goes on and on and on. That's not the best use of our money.
No, I totally agree. And what I find, because I'm the vice chair of the county's Workforce Development Board, which was my first meeting of the day today, and it's overwhelming when you see departments kind of arguing with each other, or staff that's more concerned about what their wellness is as opposed to helping the greater population. And the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, passed by Congress, changed so that the employer is the customer. So you have to go to the employer and you have to understand what they need, and then you provide workforce for them. So we know we have so many out of school or out of work youth between 18 and 24. And this really is the population we all need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Because that population that needs services and not getting them is getting bigger and bigger.
And they're vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable.
And when you're vulnerable, you make choices that are not in your best interest and that are costly to the community. Not just yourself, but to the community as a whole. And I'm not talking just dollars and cents costly, because we know that the issues of youth and homelessness impact those people that come in to visit our community, who want to stay in a nice hotel, and they're accosted on the streets verbally. They're not physically accosted, but they're verbally accosted. Is this where they want to spend their time? Since we're so dependent on the tourist industry in this area, it's imperative that we deal with the issues before they become a problem, not of just vagrancy or harassment, but criminal behavior.
It also, I believe, with the Middlebury Institute, because they are right down in the population center within the city of Monterey, a lot of foreign students come, and one of their number one issues after a good education is the safe, secure environment that they're sending their children to.
Right.
And if we want to be an international destination and a place, the one thing that we can offer is a safe, secure feeling throughout the peninsula and throughout this county. And I think we do a fairly good job. I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's room for improvement. And
Absolutely.
I think there's room that we could help some people that need help and get them to where they need to be.
And the key is that the general public needs to understand, yes, there are services out there. Those that receive them receive great service, but there aren't enough dollars to hire enough people to provide those services to meet the population that's in need. And until the public understands that part of the message, the problem will continue to grow. You have to have services for the numbers who need them. And right now we don't.
But you and I both see, because we're both attached to some government agencies,
Yeah.
that sometimes private nonprofits can do a better job of
Right.
delivering those services
Absolutely.
than government. And
Absolutely.
they can do it more efficiently, they can do it less costly.
Less costly.
And they don't have some barriers within their work laws. So they can go more into homeless encampments, or they can go and delve down into a situation a little bit more than government, which is protected in so many ways.
Right.
And rightfully so, because people will sue a government in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat.
So, I mean, I see both sides of it. It's such a
Right.
conundrum of how do you reach the right people and how to get it out and how to get the word out to the general public that there are services.
There are services. And you know, one of the things that I found very interesting, I attended a couple of years ago, MPC did a major forum on homelessness, Homeless in Paradise. And I attended, and talking to the homeless population that participated, which was huge, you discovered that, number one, they all carry cell phones. And the general population says, well, you know, they can have a cell phone, they can get a good job. No, they carry cell phones in order to network with one another, to find out where there's a safe place to sleep, where you might be able to get a meal, and what services are available in your area. They network just like the rest of us do. And many of those homeless people had been wealthy at one time, had nice homes, nice cars, and all they wanted was a job. They don't need mental health services. They don't need substance abuse services. They need to be rehired after the downturn in the economy where they lost everything. And that's a part of the population. It's obviously not the whole population. What I'm trying to say is the population of homeless really reflects the population in general. You have people who live in a house, but they're substance abusers, and they have mental illness problems, and somehow they're managing, with or without help, to cope with those situations and function in society. Well, you have that in the homeless population as well. You have a criminal element in the homeless population, but you have a criminal element that lives on your street. So, you know, that's a reflection. You also had people who were mid-level managers who lost their jobs, and nobody was hiring mid-level managers. And once you've been homeless for a period of time, generally about a year, you become part of the chronic homeless population, and getting out of it is almost impossible.
So let's talk about the mid-level manager, because I think that has been a huge segment that's been really hit hard.
Very hard.
Especially if they were in their late 40s to early 60s.
Right.
It was tough. And if they had been at a company for 20, 30 years, and they did that job and they did it really well, but either because the company was acquired or because the product was no longer anything that anybody needed.
Wanted.
I mean, there are all these reasons.
Right.
But they didn't really increase their skill set in all of the things that are needed now to be competitive in the workplace. So the county has some pretty good programs through the Workforce Development Board, and people need to understand that there are training ways and also job experience, job development. There are all types of things, both for the employer and for the people seeking employment, to be able to match them. But how we get that word out, I struggle with this every day. Of
how do you get it out, and how do you get it out to the person who's lived on the street for 2 or 3 years,
or just to the person who just lost their job,
or
that
just
is
lost
in
their job,
so much despair,
right?
And they don't know where to turn. They don't even know what kind of certifications or things that they need.
Because they never needed it before.
That's right.
And they don't know where to look for it now. Yeah, you really are correct. I don't want to put more people on the street. I want to get that word out. What do we do? Public service announcements? Are they sitting watching TV? No. So that doesn't work. I know with the youth population where Community Human Services is concerned, we have street outreach people in order to get the word out to them what services are available. But do we have that for the rest of the population, those middle managers who they're living on the street, but they're keeping themselves hidden? They live in encampments that people don't see.
Well, also, Nancy, I think some of them are still living in their houses or their
Some of them
apartments, and they're using their pension funds or they're using whatever. And if they could get help before they get to the street, would be even better.
It would be even better. I met a woman, and I'm sure you know of her. She was profiled in the Herald, and I had the opportunity to meet her a few years ago, who was living in her car. She looked like you. She was well dressed. She had her jewelry on. Her hair was properly done. She had been one of those people who, in the downturn, in her 70s, she was laid off her job. And she was living off of what she had put away for retirement someday. And when that disappeared, well, she sold her home and lived off of cash available from the sale of her home until she couldn't do that anymore. And then she moved into her car. And it took her years to find out that, oh, by the way, through the housing authority, because she was not considered employable because of her age. Through the housing authority, she qualified for a 1-bedroom apartment that Social Security would cover. Unfortunately, there were no 1-bedrooms available. So she still had to live in her car until she came up on the list to a 1-bedroom. There were 2 bedrooms open, but she didn't qualify for a 2-bedroom. She only qualified for a 1-bedroom. So there's all sorts of things that come into play in dealing with this very complex issue.
Yeah.
And it's complex. You know, you think, oh, I'm dealing with it over here. I love being part of Community Human Services, but that's only dealing with a small segment of the homeless population. It's much broader than that, and far more services. I was pleased, I have to say, when the sheriff went out to Lapis Road, and he's giving them till August 31st, which is not nearly enough time, but social services was out there too, to find out what are the needs of that community beyond housing. What are their needs? Are some of them disabled, and what's available to them? Are some of them just unemployed and they don't know what services are out there to help them get back on their feet? Some of them are the criminal. Are some of them mentally ill and need mental health services and they don't even know they're available because they can't afford the private psychiatrist? They don't know that there's places like Community Human Services or Interim that will help them with those issues. So I am pleased that at least when the sheriff went out this time, they went out with a whole slew of others to try and deal with that problem. But it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it truly is. So let me ask you,
okay,
what was the biggest surprise of what you learned about when you became a council member?
Oh my goodness, the biggest surprise.
Was it just how complex things really are? Because for me on the airport board, that was like, wow.
It was the slowness of government.
There you go.
It was, no matter how much in agreement the council may be, getting that issue finalized and passed on to staff, for then staff to work on for a year or 2 years or 3 years. That's what surprised me. It's a very slow process. My husband complains all the time. How come this hasn't happened? Well, honey, you know, we only meet twice a month.
No, it's true. And I mean, it goes back to what you and I were talking about before we started the show, which is everything comes down to time and money.
Time and money.
And,
That's
you
right.
know, does the staff have the time? Do you have the money to pay for it? And can it go on? Now, could some things maybe go a little quicker? Probably
maybe.
you and I could agree on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But then there's also an element of a lot of things that happen around here that people don't want to happen, and so they stall it and delay it. And a delay is a win for anybody that doesn't want to have something happen. So, because it costs more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it just goes on and on.
It goes on and on and on. I'm going to use Peninsula Water as an example of that. And you may not like what I say because you live. Okay. Cal-Am, and I'm not a supporter, but Cal-Am has come up with many water project ideas. And the public has always rejected them. And now the public is in dire straits and they're really angry. Sometimes the public needs to be part of the solution instead of putting up roadblocks.
I'm in total agreement. I just, do I think every solution is the perfect solution?
No. I don't think there are
But
any perfect
I also think
solutions.
as a population, we have demanded certain things that the company that took it on was Cal-Am.
Right.
And they did it because we demanded it, and then the CPUC told them they had to do it.
Yes.
So are we having to pay for it? Yes, we
Yes,
are. But
absolutely.
we demanded it. Somehow we demanded that happen. So is it fair that we pay for it? Probably.
Probably.
So, you know, if they were a company unto themselves and they didn't have regulation, could they just go build a big desal plant and give us all water?
Probably.
So would it be a lot cheaper in the long run?
Yes.
I am sure it would be.
Yes.
But we have added all these different layers. So
Exactly.
Anyway.
And people need to be engaged. I guess that's what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. Be engaged from day one, because the more things are delayed, the more expensive it gets, the more difficult it is to solve. So be engaged.
okay, with that, I'm going to say be engaged. We'll see you next month. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
loved it.
Thank you.
And this is your town, so pay attention. Thank you. And fly Monterey.